Hello, and welcome back to the How to Build a Team podcast. Today's episode, we are going to be talking about what does it take to lead an engaging team. Lois Sonstegard is an executive coach and leadership consultant with more than 30 years' experience. She has developed a unique, pragmatic approach to leadership and organizational success. She has been trained by the world's leading experts. Recently, she was invited to be one of 8 Marshall Goldsmith coaches who were interviewed for the upcoming documentary on the life and work of Marshall Goldsmith. Lois founded Build Tomorrow to help a broader audience of executives and HR professionals take advantage of her experience helping multinational companies identify, address, and resolve the challenges of today's complex business environment. Today, Lois and her team of professionals at Build Tomorrow work with boards of directors, C-suite executives, HR departments, and managers of organizations of all sizes to maximize their potential and create a legacy of success. She has extensive international experience working cross-culturally with global teams. She has innovated and patented products, so she understands the process of building companies from incubation to development to going to market. She also has experience in healthcare, developing leadership and management practices that impact the outcomes for women and children. So now I'd like to welcome to our show, Lois Sonstegard.
Hi, Lois.
Hi, Pam. Hi, David. Thank you so much. What a fun way to start a day.
It is.
It is. How are you today?
I'm doing well, thank you. We have sun finally in Minnesota, so it's very, very nice today.
And I also heard that your weather now, David, is improving.
It was until this morning. It's going to rain today on the West Coast, but just for one day, and then we're back to summer sunshine. So,
yay!
Looking forward to that. I'm missing the Philippine sunshine. So Lois, to get us started, why don't you tell us? I just did your bio here, but tell us a little bit in your own words of who you are, what you do, and why do you do what you do?
Sure. Probably the most interesting part is the why, right? There's a lot of need out there in the business world in terms of engagement. So you look at the research that's out there right now, and you look at what's happening in our teams. Gallup tells us that out of every 10 people who show up for work, only 3 are going to pull their weight and are fully engaged. So that means you have 7 people who are not pulling their weight. That has a tremendous impact on teams. When you look at the millennial population, only 1 out of 10 is fully engaged. When you look globally, the results are even worse. While in the US, we're at about a 30% rate of engagement, globally, it's 24%. And some countries are struggling even more. Japan, for example, right now has an engagement level of only 9% in the workforce. So out of every 10, only 1 is showing up engaged. Well, what does that mean? Engaged means that you're excited, you're enthused, you can't wait to go to work, you can't wait to solve a problem, and you want to participate and be a part of something. The others are showing up, putting in their time. Yes, I'll get through the day. Maybe if I don't quite get this done, this manager will leave and I won't ever have to deal with this anyway, right? Mm-hmm. So there's all sorts of things that are going on in people's thinking. And when people aren't engaged, what we're also learning is that the health of people diminishes, our ability to achieve results diminishes, and so our ROI becomes less and less. It becomes more thin. And so that is on a global sort of large scale. Then you take a look at multinationals. And I have worked with people in various parts of the world. And one of the things that you find is that we always assume that people understand what we're talking about and what we're trying to accomplish from our perspective, right? And I sat in a meeting one time with a group of people. I grew up in Japan, so I understand Japanese mannerisms and how they relate to one another. And so I was sitting in this meeting with a Japanese, a Taiwanese, Hong Kongese, somebody from Singapore, and somebody from mainland China. And none of them spoke each other's language, so English was the common language. And as I'm sitting there listening, I'm going, we're not communicating. I don't think anybody's understanding each other. So I stopped for a moment and I said, where did you learn your English? Well, one had learned their English in Boston, another in the UK, another in Australia, another in Boston, LA. So the use of idioms, the use of language was different. Brits use the English language differently than we do. But we were assuming because it was English, we were understanding each other, right? So on a very simplistic level, globally, that's a challenge. But now you also have culture. That's a part of it. And what we have done, I think, very poorly in our multinational corporations is to figure out how to traverse that culture. And then compounding that is because many of the multinationals tend to be publicly owned companies. They have numbers. They have to be Q1, Q2, Q3, Q4. And that drive to meet numbers then makes that challenge of culture and language, that sensitivity to that become more difficult. Right. So part of my passion is it doesn't have to be difficult. We can produce phenomenal results and yet attend to the people.
I agree. Yeah. So Lois, you are a coach, executive coach to consultants you work with boards of directors, C-suite executives, HR departments, and managers. So these are, big leaders in a company. When did you realize that you have passion in wanting to train and be a coach to these big executives? And how did you able to provide the service that you're passionate about? You want to build team. You want to have an engaging team. So because you're passionate about that and wanting to have that solid communication within a company, how did it all started?
How did it start? Probably with my very first experience, really, in healthcare. Mm-hmm. And part of what I realized was if we were going to change the outcomes in healthcare, and I was working with mothers and children, I was first the head of obstetrics and gynecology at the University of Minnesota, then recruited to come down to the University of Texas, Lubbock, to put into medical curriculum the things that we had developed. And so with the head of the department of the medical school, we put a system in place that really looked at how do you change outcomes. And outcomes change when you most effectively and quickly when you do it from a team perspective. Mm-hmm. It's not a natural process, and that sharing of roles is not natural. The planning is not natural that way. And yet, if you really want to be effective, that is key. Mm-hmm. So it was a gift that I had early on that if you really want to make extraordinary results, you've got to look at it in terms of how do you build a team. So as I've gone through and worked in different levels and with different groups of people, mm-hmm. you hear employees say, I'm not valued. People don't understand how hard I'm working, what my contribution is. Right? You hear many things from employees about what's happening. They don't have my back. I don't trust this. I don't trust that. Right? Mm-hmm. But then you talk to the CEOs and the people at the top, they say the same thing. And the reality is both groups want a result. We don't have jobs if we don't produce a result. So the question is, if that's both of your goals, how can we create an environment in which we can produce that? Absolutely, and in a dramatic fashion, while attending to what it is that is important for people. If we don't, it's going to be very difficult, I think, in the next decade or two to survive. Because here in the U.S., we have the lowest unemployment rate ever. We have pretty much all of our minority groups are being employed. So what's going to make a difference now in the future for companies and their survival and their growth is their ability to attend to their people.
No, I think that's huge. You mentioned about the trust factor, about how when teams or groups don't have trust in each other or have each other's back, I think was the term you used. It has such a huge effect on morale. The last corporate environment I was in still has to this day huge trust issues in its work groups. And I think that is a big part of what you'd mentioned, that 30% engagement, that people start out being very, very engaged. Probably in their first year or two of employment, they're 70, 80% engaged. And as time goes by, they feel let down by their peers, by their coworkers, by their managers, by their senior managers, and they just disengage. They show up, they go through the motions, they do the work, they get the job done, but they're not engaged while they're there. I think that trust is the biggest thing there.
So absolutely, David. And so one of the things that I like to do is to use systems that are really pragmatic. Most of our models for team development are predicated on the notion that you create trust. Without trust, you can't have teamwork, right? Sure. But the reality is we have created such an environment in our workplace, there isn't trust. So you're just putting a Band-Aid on for many organizations, and you have to grow it, and people have to learn that it's safe. Well, what do you do in the meantime? And so what I have done is to create processes and systems that will allow you to grow and develop team, even in the face of no trust, because you've got to be pragmatic. Let's be realistic. This is our world. 7 out of 10 are just showing up. They've been burned. And so how do we pull them along? And you might as well just deal with the reality, right? Mm-hmm. Because otherwise you're not going to have a long-lasting result. Mm-hmm. And then not only creating the process, but then it's a follow-up system. If you don't have follow-up, you're not going to have success. Mm-hmm. Yeah. People need to know you care.
Right.
Yes.
Actually, I just want to share a little bit about, when I was at that digital marketing company, I got burned out. I feel like I'm just another brick on the wall. I feel like I'm not being valued, even though I was able to contribute and was able to help with creating the system and the process. It was a startup company, and I was handling 11 clients at that time. Like, all of the clients are based in the US, and it is a digital marketing company. And, I think once an employee feels like they are not valued, that they are not being heard, and that they are not having the growth that they want so that they can share more and influence more in that company, they're just gonna burn out, just like what happened to me. So when I felt that, I resigned. Well, there are other things that was involved in my resignation. I've got no more time with my kids. But I think the more, the biggest impact that happened there was I just got burned out and never felt valued. So I resigned and started Great Work Online, and the culture with Great Work Online is more of like a family. Everybody can be heard. When we do have a meeting, I think that is also one important aspect in having a company, is that you need to have this certain time to spend with your employees, whether it's a physical employee or a remote team, that you need to have, you need to meet with your team and listen to each of your team members' ideas and suggestions.
I'm just going to comment on the burnout, because there's some really wonderful research on burnout. And one of the things that they talk about in the research is that when we lose purpose and mission in what we're doing, we burn out. So you can take two people. You take Mother Teresa, for example, who never quit her work. She worked from morning till night and did it tirelessly, right? And she never burned out. Why? Because she was doing it. She was driven by her mission and purpose in life. Yeah. And she felt valued by the sisters around her. And so when we feel burned out, it's when we lose that sense of mission and purpose, because we're no longer, as you said, valued. My opinion doesn't count. It doesn't matter if I showed up. In the meeting, I may express my opinion, but nobody does anything with it. I do a report. Nobody does anything with my report. So why am I really here? That's when we burn out.
Interesting. Sure. This is the perfect segue, Lois, to what my next question was going to be is, so we've identified what some of the issues are in the workplace, and that there are people who are more affected than others. But what does it take from a grassroots management standpoint? What does it take to lead an engaged team, or how do you build an engaged team? How do you build a team so you don't have that burnout and you don't have that 30 or less % of engagement?
It's a great question, because we try and do it in pockets. I think a department may decide that they're going to take this on, or I was just recently with an organization that has decided to deal with culture throughout their very, very large organization. They're a Fortune 100 company. Mm-hmm. And they've done it by putting together a culture process that they walk people through. They suggest that you do it. Part of your promotion is based on your participating in this training, but not everybody does, right? Mm-hmm. So it's by choice. So the problem when it's by choice and not everybody participates is you kind of have a culture, right?
Yeah.
And then the loudest and strongest voice is the one that gets carried the furthest. Mm-hmm. So ideally, it's great when you can start from the bottom up. But before I get into that, I'll just describe a little bit about process, if you would like. So
yes,
you can understand that.
Yes, please.
But I think that for me, having really simple, pragmatic systems are the most important, because people won't remember much. They just need something that will work, that they can understand, that's not full of a lot of theory that they have to have running around in their head. They just need to be able to apply it, right? So I like the ideal situation is to look at either from the hiring process, looking at doing assessments. And in those assessments, certainly looking at skill sets. But along with that is attitude. Attitude is huge. And I had one of my biggest learnings when I was in the beauty business, and we were doing a photo shoot in Hollywood. And my photographer is an ex-Marine. He is known in Hollywood for his knockout white. So he's very specific about how a shot needs to be made. Mm-hmm. We needed 10 models, and we did a call for models with amongst different modeling agencies. And John said, I've got 100 for us to choose from. I said, John, this is going to take us 2 days to find 10 models. He said, no, we're going to make our first cut in 2 hours. I said, not possible. And I said, I've got to get the team together, the makeup, the hair, all of that, if we're going to do this correctly. He said, no, I don't need any of those people. And he said, our first take is on attitude. He said, all I want to know from each model, he said, we'll spend 2 minutes. That's it. Each one. What's your name? What's your address? What was your last job? That's it. He said, you'll know in 2 minutes if you want them. And you know what? He was absolutely right. And several years later, we were doing another photo shoot together in Milan. We had the German embassy and the U.S. embassy working with us together on this in a beautiful, exclusive villa. We had all of the top magazines there, Vogue, Elle, all of the top fashion magazines were guests of ours, right? And so we were doing a model call for what we were going to do the next day. And they were all in this room, and we were going around. Now I had the stylist, the makeup, all the people were there. Wardrobe was all there. We were all going around and interviewing these people. And we'd write down our names in rank order of who we wanted. And then we regrouped and looked at each other's lists and said, okay, who have we selected? We had all selected the top Russian model. We had the top Russian model. We had the Brazilian Miss Brasilia. We had people from all over the world had shown up for this photo shoot. And so we had selected this top Russian model. John had not. So he said, okay, we're going to do this again. We're going to ask a new set of questions, and then we'll regroup and see what you decide. The second time around, we all eliminated the Russian model. And so when we announced the winners of who we were going to use the next day, we had this explosion in the room from this Russian model. How could you not take me? I am the world's best, right? And so what he taught me was, if we had used her, she would have consumed our entire day taking care of her ego. We would not have had a good shoot, right? Mm-hmm. So when you look at hiring, it's what are their skill sets? What are the attitude? What will that person really bring to the job? And I use an assessment process that from that then generates questions that can be used in interviews that really help you get at that specific person's issues that come up based on the assessment. Mm-hmm. From that then, when the person is selected, comes a year long of onboarding coaching, because we hire people, we put them in the job and then want them to be successful, but we don't coach them specific to what their need is based on what we saw demonstrated. And then, so from that coaching, then it's the team building, it's leadership training, manager training, and then coaching people for that success. With that process, then I also do, every single group has monthly follow-up. These are the action plans you laid out. What have you done? How have you accomplished them? And if you're not accomplishing them, we've got to regroup, because there is no such thing as not accomplishing what you agreed to, right? Oh, so wow. It's very pragmatic. It's very simple, but it's results oriented.
Right. This is so interesting. I really think now that we're going to have a part 2 episode with Lois, and we're going to talk about hiring process. Right?
Hiring process. Yeah. It is huge, because here's some of the stuff that's coming out right now. Hiring is one thing. Where we do the worst is with promotions, because we see what somebody's doing and we promote, and hoping that they will have the skills or the talents for the new job. But they may not be the right person for that job. They may be better for this over here.
Specific, yes.
Right? So if we don't know and measure that, and I measure everything, because I want to know, does it make a difference? I want to be able to say, because we did this and this, here's our result. Here's what's happening to the teams. And here then is where we're going to go next.
True.
Yeah.
I think
so. Along with that, Pam, one of the interesting things is, you're aware that I have spent some time with Gary Varsho, who is a professional baseball player and scout for the Pittsburgh Pirates now. So he scouts talent for the Pittsburgh Pirates. And one of the things that he talks about is when he's scouting, he usually goes to AAA teams. So that's the level right below the professional level, to look at who they pull up into professional baseball. So he'll look at a AAA player and he'll go, I've seen this before. All he has to do is just change this a little bit. Will he do that? So he'll ask people around this player, why does he always do it that way? Would he be open to changing and doing it in another way?
A different strategy, yeah.
Right? And some people will never want to change. He says, those people you don't want. Other people, somebody just didn't ask them. And when you ask them, they go, oh, wow, I can do that. And they adapt, and now they're in the professional league, right? So a lot of it depends upon what we do and how we pull people into the system, because people really want to be successful.
True.
We just need to help them get there.
Yeah. You know what? I really think it's having a system and a process, a solid process in your company. It's also important that you listen to your employees, because that's when you'll be able to figure out, if you hire that person you hired that person probably for this particular position, but he or she excels in this other project or task. So it's really important that you look and listen to your employees. Oh, Lois, because of the time, this is very interesting topic. We can go on and for hours and talk about building a team, and this is our passion.
It is your passion.
Yes.
So let me just make a comment about your passion, because for everybody who's listening, I do work with Pam and David in their Great Works online, and they have an incredible process of working with people virtually. And so part of why I can do what I do is because I have a virtual team also behind me who helps facilitate. So
thank you so much, Lois. It's always been a walk in the park to work with you. My team, Dave, your project manager, is always happy every time you have a meeting, and everything is just like boom, boom, boom. he's, after your meeting, I can see notifications already, and he's excited to do all of your stuff. And I think that's one, I think that's one thing about, building a culture and listening to your employee, whether it's a physical or a remote team. So my last question for you, Lois, before we wrap this up, can you give us your best practices in managing a team so that they will turn out to be functional and engaging?
Okay, so with teams, if I have an ideal situation, of course, you want to build trust because people do feel good when they can be a part of something where there's a trust. I know you have my back. And by trust, I mean being able to share what it is that's important to you. It's not all of the stuff in your life. It's just simply being able to share what's important. So when I was talking with Gary Varsha, for example, one of his mentors was Jim Leland, who was manager for the Pittsburgh Pirates. He said one of the things that Jim would do is he would go around always the next day after a game outfield, and he'd talk with everybody one by one by one. And you knew when your turn was coming through your peripheral vision as he watched him making his way around, right? Yeah. And he coached everybody differently. So for one person, it would be, you know what, you really messed up last night. What was the matter with you? And he'd get into their face and into their game. Another one, it would be, what's going on at home today? Last night wasn't your best. What's happening? So he wanted to know the things that were going to impact his players on the field, right? And so team trust is partly about, do you know me enough so that if I'm struggling with something personally, you will help carry me and cover my back. And I have done a lot of formal negotiations amongst team members just around that issue. I know this is a huge thing I'm going to be dealing with in the next month. Here are my schedules. Here are my deadlines. This is what's happening at home or whatever. I need help in order to meet these commitments. Who will step up and help me? And you negotiate that and you make an agreement amongst each other, right? So trust is huge. Then comes commitment. Commitment does not occur unless we have productive conflict. None of us tend to like conflict. We want to go from trust right into commitment. But what productive conflict means is I aired my opinions. I aired my feelings. I talked about what wasn't going to work and you heard me. And we talked it out until we got through it so we could commit to what it is that we're trying to do, right? And then comes accountability. You can't be accountable if you haven't committed to something. And then after accountability, it's okay. We're accountable for results. Are we achieving them? And you go back through the process with follow-up. Always follow up. If you don't follow up, it's not going to work.
Awesome. No, things that you're saying, I'm framing these in my last corporate position that I was in. And I was just like, yes. Oh, this just makes so much sense. This just makes so much sense. And yes. It's a big thing. But one of the problems that I found is that a lot of managers would talk to employees, but they were, what's the term? Confirmation bias. Yes. That they would be looking for specific answers from their team. Right. And if they get the answer or the direction that they wanted the conversation to go, they would disregard that and move on to the next person until they found a person that gave them the information, the answers that they were already predetermined that they wanted to have. And it's really interesting to hear a complete outsider, nothing about that job that I was in, but to hit so many points that make sense to that. It's kind of spooky.
Well, I'm glad.
Yeah.
So,
go ahead, Pam.
So just to give a summary of what we're talking about here, Lois gave us the 3 top, her best practices on how you can have an engaging team, which is number 1, you mentioned trust, which is very important too, commitment and accountability. So that's it, guys. That's it for now. I hope we can, still talk about this for hours, but for limited time, we need to end this episode. But I already have what do you call this? Part 2 episode with Lois about hiring process and all
Absolutely.
of that. So yes, this is very interesting. I hope you guys learned a lot with from what Lois shared with us. But before we go, Lois, can you talk about the Marshall documentary? You're part of that. And
Sure.
where can our audience see you? Where they can see your services? Where can they contact you?
Sure. So the easiest place to see what it is that we have is on our website, which is www.buildtomorrow, build with the number 2, morrow.com. The Marshall Goldsmith documentary was an incredible honor. I don't know if you have read Marshall Goldsmith's work. He's known for books like Trigger, What Got You Here Won't Get You There. He has done some incredible research on what it is that allows people to be successful, executives to be successful. And he coaches only the top CEOs of Fortune 100 plus or not-for-profit. So World Bank, CEO, UN, he has Mayo Clinic, Ford Company, and the list goes on and on. What I love about Marshall is he's pragmatic. You can really get through a lot of garbage just with a pragmatic system and leave it behind you. We spend too much time trying to make garbage look pretty, and he just lets it go and gets to the heart of what's going on, develops it, and moves to the future. And I think for me, that perspective allows us to be more efficient with our time. So I love it. So I was invited to be a part of his documentary that's being created about his life and what he's done. It's really his legacy documentary. And there were 8 coaches from around the world that were interviewed talking about why Marshall Goldsmith and what it has meant for our individual practices. And what I spoke about was using his methodology, particularly in intercultural situations, because it's the only method that I know of that traverses culture. And it will be coming out. It's due to come out in 2020. We will know when parts are being released, probably in early fall. So stay tuned to our website, and we'll get you information, or just email us, email Pam. We will get you that information if you would like it.
Yes, you can check her out as well on Facebook. She's been posting about this documentary on her Facebook. So there you have it, guys. Thank you again, Lois, for being on our show. If you guys find some value in this episode, please write us a comment. We will really appreciate that. Write us a review. We will really appreciate that. You can check our website for more of our services. It is www.greatworkonline.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. Just search for Great Work Online and you'll see us there. Or you can connect with me and David on LinkedIn. Just search for Pam Pormentilla or David Monteith. So I think that's it for now. Thank you, guys, and we will catch you on the next episode. Bye.
Thank you so much.
Bye.
Have a great day. Bye-bye.